Can you hear me now? All right. It looks like there's audio going. Okay. So the goal is to make 3. You can make more. At this point, we're moving quickly because the computer is really easy to copy and paste and rotate and kind of manipulate things and look at them in different angles. You can do 5. You can do 10. You can have 3 really nice ideas and a bunch of fragments of ideas. The process. Can you try it now? Can you hear me now? I got audio going. There's like a 30-second delay. YouTube people, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, you can do it at least 3, but your fragments and process are important. So keep your sketchbook with you while you're 3D modeling in Rhino. You have your mouse, but you should also have your pencil. They should be kind of hand in hand, especially as we're learning. If you guys have desires and dreams of the 3D variety, we can help you make them come to life. It's way easier to help you if you have a sketch or have a drawing. Like, I'm trying to make this. Maybe you have a 3D model made out of paper, so you guys can continue to kind of design and ideate with your hands and with paper, even though we're in the computer. But especially when you're asking us questions, like, try to have a drawing, try to have a sketch of what it is you're trying to accomplish, okay? This assignment uses a number of commands in Rhino. So the point of this is to teach you Rhino, to teach you how to accomplish this. I'm trying to not to use too many. There's probably like a dozen of commands that you can have to learn in order to accomplish this. There's gajillions, hundreds of commands in Rhino, but we don't need to know about all of them or any of them really at this point. Throughout this assignment, in bold are usually Rhino commands. So if something's in bold, try typing it in Rhino and see what happens. It will usually make something work here, okay? You'll also notice that there is a template file. So if you go to the Google Drive under the templates folder, there is a file. I've put some stuff on mine, but there's going to be some little scale people. There's going to be a grid. There's going to be a ground, and there's even going to be this little PDF of essential Rhino commands that I put in the Google Drive, but I stuck it in the Rhino file here so you can look at it, if you're wondering. This kind of extends upon the assignment PDF itself with a few more commands that are good to be aware of. In particular, these, let me go to the top view. A little slow. In particular, these guys over on the right start to get into shortcuts. A number of these have shortcuts, actually. These guys, aliases. Aliases means shortcut. And as you guys start to learn Rhino and you start to learn AutoCAD or Photoshop or whatever, you're going to want to start to learn the shortcuts. That'll save you lots of time and you can get more sleep at night. Cool. So I'm going to kind of walk through how to achieve this. The main goal is to use the assets from assignment 8, but once you get the hang of it, we can start to use other assets. So we can start to kind of create geometry. The most basic way is to draw a line as, say, the base of a wall and extrude that line to create a wall. But you can also use these shapes, so like planes, boxes, cylinders, pyramids, spheres, otherwise known as like platonic solids that exist in the solid menu under Rhino, to start to manipulate. So not everything has to be from, say, the image of a flower or a bird's wing or whatever. Some of you have started to 3D scan your objects using Polycam. I showed that a little bit briefly. There is an incoming kind of complete tutorial on that. And you can use 3D scans of your paper models in this exercise as well. But it's not in this assignment brief because I want you guys to figure out these surfaces and curves first before we get into the world of meshes. It's kind of could complicate things a little bit. But just know, looking ahead, you can use those. All right. So I'm gonna start here, and I'm not necessarily gonna follow this step by step, but we're gonna talk kind of about how to manipulate the shapes in Rhino. Okay, so you're gonna copy and paste your shapes. I go to rendered, here's a flower, here's a barn, from the Rhino file that you were working in, let's call it the asset file, into the template file. And let's call that the working file. Often you have multiple Rhino windows open, either with different schemes or in this case like assets and like a design. But either way, you're gonna wanna kind of copy and paste your objects into this file. At this point, right away, step one, I would save it. Like get in a habit of saving your work. Stuff happens. Often stuff happens like right when you don't want stuff to happen. And often losing work, if you spent hours on something, can be a traumatic experience. I know. So we're gonna save early, we're gonna save often. You're gonna call this like Rhino demo. I would get in the habit of 23/10/23. It's kind of a fun date, like year, month, date. Save your stuff. I would save a new Rhino file for every day that you work on something. Storage is cheap. You can always delete like old stuff later, but get in the habit of kind of having a process where you're cataloging your work, not just like overwriting files, because I guarantee you at some point something's going to go wrong and you need to go back and like find some older work. If you have a system, it makes that easier. The second thing you should be aware of is there is autosave. So in Rhino, like every other program that exists on Earth, there's autosave functions that are usually embedded. They usually come in different ways. In Rhino, we go Tools, Options, which is like opening the hood of the car. We can look under the hood and change all the settings. And if we go to Files, Autosave, this beautiful thing. Make sure it's checked and that it's saved and turned on. And you can change the number here. I forget what the default is, every 10 minutes. You can have it autosave every 3 minutes or whatever. If you're like, where is the autosave? I don't know where that file is. Here we can see where it is. Or you can click this little ellipsis to choose a different location for it to save, or you can click in the address bar here and copy, and then open up a folder, click in the address bar and paste, hit enter. And now I've been brought to my Rhino autosave window. Just FYI, most time if your computer crashes and you have to open up your autosave, open it and then resave it. Call it something else. If you just are operating out of your autosave folder, you're going to be in for a headache later. So use the autosave folder only for like opening your autosave and then save it afterwards. Okay. I want to cover that because that's important, and computers crash and you always lose it. The other thing you should be aware of, or you should use, and those of you using UIUC Anywhere are doing this already, is OneDrive. So you can like back up like all of your work on your computer to OneDrive, Google Drive, Box. You have like terabytes and terabytes of free cloud storage right now. Get in the habit of like just dumping everything onto one or multiple of those services every once in a while. If you use OneDrive, you could have it as like a folder in your computer. Capiche? Got that? Autosave? All right. So we've got some stuff inside of Rhino. We've also got, I'm gonna change this material. I made my ground some weird material. We've got a grid. We're gonna, big picture, copy and paste these little pieces of paper and cut them and rotate them into this grid. We're gonna repeat that. To jump to the end, I didn't really explain this too much last time. You're gonna output some images. And you should get in the habit of outputting images of whatever you're working on inside of Rhino on a regular basis. Like whenever you close the computer, take a screenshot of whatever you're working on, It's a great habit to get into. I'm working with my third years now, and I ask them to like show me their work, like show me what you're working on, and they refuse to do it. They wait until the end, until they're like quote finished before they show me it, which means that we can't actually like design. We can't like draw on top of their work. We can't look at it and see it before it kind of emerges at the end. So while I have you guys in this first year, let's like get a good healthy habit of like constantly making screenshots of whatever we're doing and kind of archiving it, putting it in this case, your PDF every week of what you're doing, but in the future, maybe like on a Miro board or a concept board, like some kind of public space where you can show your work, like a digital whiteboard. To do that, there's a very simple command called view capture. And there's two, view capture to clipboard and view capture to file. I think these are under this menu. But view capture to, let's say, clipboard. What it will do is it will just like kind of grab a picture, with my settings, of whatever the viewport is, whatever I'm looking at. Or I can have it capture like a specific view. I've got a couple of saved views here we'll talk about in a second. But this is really nice. It will do basically whatever I see, I get. So in this case, I'm in shaded view, kind of centered weirdly. The resolution button down here changes the resolution of my screenshot. And so this is an easy way for you to like do 1920 by 1080 screenshots rather than like little tiny ones. The scale button here, if you double it, so go from 1920 by 1080 doubled to 3840 by 2160, you've just made a 4K image, so you can like screenshot 4K stuff. Get in the habit of doing that. We live in 2023. If you're screenshotting really tiny little images of it, it's going to be fairly useless very soon. All the images are going to be made in 4K very shortly, if they aren't. Eventually they'll be 8K, but most of, like, I mean, new laptops are shipping with 4K monitors for the most part. Okay, so that view is no good. There are some good views that I've saved in here. If I type named view, it opens up my named view panel, this little guy. And you'll see I've got 3 named views already saved in here. Let's double click one and see what it looks like. So this one's kind of looking from the front, the other one's kind of looking at it from the side, and then the third one, Axon, is looking at it from like above, like an Axon view. So these named views are the ways that we save a camera view through the named view panel. So this is nice if I'm like orbiting or rotating around, I can always double click on my named view to kind of see what's up, all right? Let's go to like 2-point perspective from the side. There we go. Okay, so then if I wanted to make a screenshot of this under rendered, I would do view capture to file. So my resolution could be the viewport. I would recommend 1920 by 1080 at least. You can change some things like the transparent background, you can add the grid and all that, and I would hit OK and save it. And then this image is going to go on a title block in InDesign, like we did with the pictures of the models. Okay. So I just want to show that real quick. It's important to know that you can screenshot your work again when you're learning and you want to like get some help. Great things to send to your TAs or to send to me is like screenshots of where you got stuck and Rhino files. So like save your 3DM file and like email us the Rhino file with a screenshot. Maybe a photograph of your sketchbook with like a picture of what you're trying to accomplish. If you send me a email that says I got stuck doing the thing and I got the whoopsie daisy, you know, your language is gonna be all wrong, you're not gonna know what you're talking about, the first thing I'm gonna ask you is send me the Rhino file and send me a screenshot. Okay, so now you know how to do that. Okay, so let's go back to the paper. Let's go back to parallel projection. I think while you're modeling, we want to have our projection in parallel. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. And let's do the flower. So I'm going to copy it. And by copy it, I mean type the word copy into the command line and then follow the directions. When you're learning Rhino, for all these commands that I'm teaching you, like copy, for example, I'm following the directions here. So it says select objects to copy first. So I'll select it. It says hit enter when you're done. All right, I'll hit enter. It asks me to have a point to copy from. In this case, I'm trying to like snap to the edge of it, and it's not really snapping. That's because at the bottom, these snaps, or otherwise known as O snaps, or object snaps, are not turned on. And so particularly this one called near, you got end, near, mid, center, intersection, perpendicular, all vertex. These are very useful. And so this allows me I can snap to the edge of this thing, and then say I want to copy it just over here, or if I want to copy it, like snap to the edge of this flower for whatever reason. So O snap, super helpful. The other really big picture thing at the bottom here, right next to O snaps, is ortho. And you can see when I copy, my object is like moving straight, or it's moving straight, like in 90-degree sort of intervals. That's because ortho is turned on. It is orthographic. If I turn it off, now I can copy it kind of anywhere, okay? If I hold shift, that will toggle ortho off or on. So using O snaps and using ortho are like two really, really important things that will increase your accuracy and allow you to kind of move things where you want, rather than move things just randomly within the 3D space. Okay. The other thing that will give you accuracy is, say for copying here, I'm in the 3D view, so I can kind of orbit around. Things are kind of weird. I feel like I don't have a lot of control over where I'm copying things. So I'm going to double click my viewport so I can see, say, the top view. Zoom over here. I can see the side views, like the front and the right. In this case, I just need the top view. So I can like start the command in 3D view, and I can like finish the command or do the command in the top view. Because maybe it makes more sense to me to think about this as like a bird's eye, grid-based exercise or whatever. Okay, so copying, that's going to be your first friend. Moving, I can move. Scaling, if I want to scale something, so I type scale. You select the base point. So in this case, like maybe from the middle, the base point would be in the middle. It asks me for a reference. So let's say this point, and then ask for a second reference. Let's say over here. So you can see by changing the reference, I can make it bigger or smaller. Why I love Rhino so much is we can alternate between being very fast and loose. So there's this gumball, this black and white, or no, green and red and blue thing that's floating in the middle of my scene. If you don't see it, type gumball and click on, turn it on. So I can use that to kind of like move things around. I can use it to, there's little boxes on the outside that allow me to scale. If I hold shift, it'll keep it as a fixed aspect ratio. Or I can be very precise. So I can be loose or I can be precise. So for scale, for example, like say I wanted this flower to be like 10 feet, like specifically, I can, let's click on nothing, let's type scale, click on the object, hit enter. Base point, I'm gonna say it's on like one side. So I'm gonna snap to, say, the left side. The reference point, I'm gonna say it's somewhere over on the other side. And we'll click once. The second reference point, rather than randomly picking like some dimension, I can type in 10 feet, 10 apostrophe, and hit enter. So that makes it, if I hold it over my grid here, pretty good, 10 feet. This is a 12-foot grid, 12-foot bays, right? If you don't trust yourself, you can always measure things. So Rhino is really great. We can type in distance, and I can click 2 points, and it will tell me in the command line the distance between things. There's this whole thing called dimensions, which is dimension strings. We don't need to worry about this, but this allows you to put these little tags that show you the dimension of things, and we can change how that looks and everything, but we're not going to worry about those quite yet. Okay, so copying, scaling, rotating. I can use the gumball to rotate, or I could type in rotate, or I'll click on an object, hit enter, a center of rotation, maybe it's over here somewhere, a first reference, and a second reference. You can see how this will now rotate around that point. So by being kind of deliberate and slow with what points I'm using to manipulate or move my geometry, I can be very precise. But for you guys, just get it, use the gumball a lot, or use the move command, and don't worry too much about like dimensions. But go back to my assignment. Okay, so I say it at the top. Move, copy, scale, rotate, rotate 3D, split, and bend are your main command friends in this exercise. So split and bend, those are the other two. So let's copy this sucker over. Let's copy it twice. So to split something, I need like scissors, I need to cut along a line. So I could draw a line. I could draw a circle. I could draw a curve. There's different ways to draw curves, but let's do it. Goes all the way through. Hitting enter repeats whatever your last command was. So like there's a line, there's a circle, there's a curve. Let's type split. So select the object to split, hit enter. Select the cutting object, so that'll be these curves. Hit enter. And now I can like move out these different parts. I've kind of split up my flower into these little chunks. I've cut it. If I go back to rendered mode, we'll see that that flower has now been cut up in different ways. So obviously you can see I can use Rhino as a way to trim my curves. So you can be very precise, or be sort of loose. So this is why I say don't model in rendered mode. I just drew 2 lines, but I can't see them because by default rendered mode doesn't show curves. So make sure that you're kind of going back and forth. It's a weird thing. Let's split this thing with these 2 lines, and now I've got like a single petal of the flower that you can use. So kind of like we did in Photoshop, where we use the maybe magic wand or the lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, we can draw curves in Rhino similarly. Okay. So let's draw another line in this one. Let's go back to shaded mode. I'm going to copy this thing twice. Okay, let's split this one. Objects to split using this guy. And let's fold it. So there's no fold command. There might be fold. There's fold face command. Don't use it. It's really doesn't make any sense. I don't know how to use it. Maybe one of you geniuses can figure it out. You can teach us, but it involves drawing this line and doing the split and setting the angles all in one. There's certain commands that are like multi-step. The way I'm showing you is easier. So split it first and then do rotate 3D. Sometimes there's rotate, which does this in 2 dimensions. 3D means I can set the angle and have it rotate in any plane. So I want to rotate, say, this top part. So I'll select it, I'll hit enter. This is moving. Okay, and then it asks me for start of rotation axis. So I can stay in the top view here because I just need to click 2 points along that line. I just need to, by clicking 2 points, I'm setting an axis. I'm setting a direction around which this thing could rotate. This may seem a bit scary. This is a big part of 3D literacy. There's lots of ways in Rhino that we can kind of manipulate things in different planes. And I think this sort of rotate 3D along a line is an easy way to start for you to start to think about pulling up out of the flat plane or the XY plane. So I'm going to click once and twice, then it asks me for a first reference point or an angle. So I could type in like 30 degrees and it will just make a 30-degree angle. Or what I'm doing here, sort of get into 3D mode and just kind of eyeball an angle. So I could type in 30 or 45 and it will be right, or just eyeball it. Okay, so that's folding using the rotate 3D command. Bending is more intuitive. We just type bend, and this one asks for a spine, and so I'm going to use that same line. We'll do from there, start of the spine, and then end of the spine over here. And it's going to ask me for a point to bend through. If I just stay in the 3D view, you notice it's going to bend it only in that X and Y plane. So it's going to kind of like twist it side to side. It won't bend it up. I need to go into maybe my right view or the front view. And because I have my spine at an angle, the result's going to be kind of funky, kind of weird. If you want clean results, have your spine be like straight. Now I have this bent shape. Okay. So folded and bent. Shorter spine, tighter fold. You just kind of try these things multiple times and click different. Have shorter spines, shorter lengths, bigger angles, smaller angles, and see what the results are. Let's go back to our PDF here. Okay, split. Trim is kind of like split, but it's destructive. Rotate 3D, bend. I'm not going to show you right now, but there's also twist and cage edit, which you can use to manipulate geometry. Maybe I'll show you cage edit. Let's undo. Use these with caution. In fact, don't use them until you know what you're doing. It's easy to, in the computer, make things that are really cool looking, but had nothing to do with reality. And kind of ignore things like geometry or these little or gravity or these little humans. Okay, twist and cage edit are a big part of that. But this allows us, if I hit enter, to make a cage. This is a flat plane, so it's a little bit simpler. I can make a cage on a 3D object as well, and then be able to manipulate the control points. So I grab these guys. And you can see this starts to deform in weird ways. Twist is similar. So read the assignment and heed my warning. The goal in this assignment is not to 3D model something completely wacky, twisted, or eventually unbuildable. We are having fun. We are making abstract compositions, but I want you to kind of think about making an analog to your physical model. So strips, pieces, shapes that are cut and folded and rolled don't all of a sudden make something that's like totally crazy or totally see-through, or it just looks more like CGI than architecture. Okay. I did not make that clarification last time, and people came at me with this crazy stuff. There's an official term for that. It's called unicorn rainbow vomit. And it's just like that, you know, just kind of chaotic, cool looking stuff that doesn't mean much, right? The other thing you can do is a rebuild. So rebuilding a curve or rebuilding a surface allows us to kind of manipulate the control points. And if you rebuild a surface, you can start to pull it up into 3D space too. More on that in a second. Okay, back to Rhino. So let's say I've got, let's do this piece of algae. Let's say I've got a shape. Let's say I want that not to be just infinitely thin, but to have thickness to it. To do that, we can do extrude. It's probably the simplest way, where you take a flat thing and extrude it in one direction. Think about those Play-Doh toys. You stick the Play-Doh in and kind of press it, and it squeezes out a shape based on the cutout. So if I do extrude surface, because I have a surface here, and I pull it up, we'll notice inside of my command line at the top, in parentheses, this is totally not working, web captioning. In parentheses, there is a bunch of options. So like direction, let's try that. Let's click direction. Let's go in the side view and go like at an angle. So by changing the direction, woo, it's now extruding at an angle, right? By default, the direction is up. It's always going like in the Z axis. It's like type direction. We can go back to the side view. I can click once, I can click twice in the side view, which makes an axis up. And there's a bunch of other things. The one you need to be aware of is solid equals yes. So I want to keep it as yes and click. Looks cool in shaded mode, but when I go to rendered mode, well, it's all messed up because I'm on the wrong layer. Let's go back to my algae layer. So it's under my properties. Let's change it to seaweed. And my orbiting's all weird. So I'm gonna click on my seaweed. I'm gonna type ZSA. That'll fix my orbiting. And so you can see what used to be a nice algae image is now really weird. And it's kind of, the image is trying to map around this geometry and it's not matching. Back to shaded, looks good. Rendered, no good. So let's undo. Algae layer live, or seaweed layer live. And let's do extrude curve this time, or no, extrude surface this time. But I'm gonna turn solid equals yes off. So this time, it just gives us the side of it. There's no cap on it. If I go to rendered mode, it's still gonna look goofy. It still has this image that's being wrapped around the side of it. So this geometry that we have here is seaweed shaped, but it's a single surface. It's just been wrapped all the way around the side of this thing. I could unroll it. There's a command called unroll that I could do, but instead I'm gonna Control Z. And we're gonna try something different. Let's copy this. I'm gonna copy it up. Or another way to do it is I can offset surface. And this does it in a direction at a distance. And the difference between offset and copy will make more sense in a second when we're dealing with like crazy geometry. But you can see both of those will like move my geometry up. Let's consider those like the top and bottom of a wall. And I would make a sidewall on these things by doing the extrude command, or very simply, I could duplicate the border. Dupe border. This is a really popular command. So quite literally, it duplicates the border of a surface and gives us a curve. So I can get that curve, which then I can extrude, not the surf, but curve. This happens a lot in Rhino. Commands have two ways they can be done, one for curves or one for surfaces. So just FYI, double check the one you're clicking on. If it doesn't work, like try the other. Try the curve. So if I extrude this and go up, and I'm gonna snap to my other one. I'm gonna delete that offset. So I've got a top, I've got a side, and I've got a bottom. Like 3 different surfaces. Let's go to rendered mode again. Still is goofy because that side surface is the same material or the same layer as my top. So I'm just gonna make a new layer. Let's call it wall or whatever, sides. Let's click on this and let's make our layer wall. So now I've got a solid sidewall. So if you're gonna thicken things, do this. Have them be on a separate layer, a separate material. At this point, say I want to make the walls pink or whatever. Now they're gonna be pink. And then if it's too thick, I can select all 3 of these, and I could extrude them down or something like as a group. Right? So this gets into a concept in Rhino called polysurfaces. This thing is still 3 surfaces. I can click on them individually. They are separate. If I say click on all 3 of these or drag and click and type join, that will join them into a poly surface. And let's make this layer seaweed. And the poly surface is messed up. We don't like poly surfaces for this. So a poly surface is, in this case, 3 surfaces that touch at an edge and are joined together. They're kind of like welded at that edge, at that seam. All like 3D shapes in Rhino, like all solid shapes, like a box or a sphere or a torus, are made up of surfaces that are like welded together. These poly surfaces. Often you're joining them together or you're exploding, so I can explode it and they'll all go back to individual surfaces. But you can see after I've joined it, it's hard to get the image to look right. It's going to be a little, it's not impossible, but it's not worth the time. So I would just Control Z, like go back before you join it together and keep them separate. All right. If you don't know what you're looking at, click on it, something, and look at your properties menu. In the top left, there'll usually be some information there. I don't know why the caption's not going. I bumped it. There we go. Wrap up relatively shortly here. I'm not going to go the full class. Bear with me. Laptops and streaming. Any questions so far? We're waiting for my computer to catch up. Super clear? Yes.
Kind of like the professional of the SketchUp.
Yeah, so you could do stuff in SketchUp. I think learning Rhino is better, especially while you're beginners. It may seem a little bit harder to figure out because there's like more buttons and stuff, but once you gain mastery in it, you'll open SketchUp and you'll be super frustrated because you're like, oh, I can't do anything in SketchUp, or I can't have the control. SketchUp is really good for, like the name suggests, sketching in 3D. So doing what we call like a block out, meaning like a rough 3D boxy blocked out version of something, and then we take it into Rhino to like tune it, or like to be more specific. This workflow is trying to teach you to move quick and sketchy in Rhino, so you never have to open SketchUp. Yeah. Part of the reason is they charge a lot of money too for their product, because they've cornered the market in this simple 3D modeling thing, and then they jack the price up, like most things. So, Rhino keeps you a good deal forever. So
how much is there like is you got a subscription you can ask?
For Rhino?
Yeah.
If you're not a student, it's $1,000. If you are a student, it's $195. Naveen is working on getting a deal. For those of you who have not bought Rhino yet, like maybe hold off. He's trying to get a deal, so it's down to $100 a pop if you guys go in as a group of more than 30. So talk to Naveen. He's getting in touch with McNeil, and I think we can make that happen. So sorry I didn't put that out earlier. Use UIUs anywhere in the meantime. I don't know what SketchUp's pricing is. It keeps changing. It's like monthly, many dollars a month. But SketchUp is a cool tool. I like Revit. I'm allergic to it. I open up SketchUp and I get hives, and I'm really uncomfortable working with it. Okay. So let's copy this. We're back in streaming. Let's do a bent one, and you'll see why the offset is like different than copy. Let's bend. Let's do a spine somewhere at the bottom, going up to there. Let's go to the side view. A simple bend. Okay, so I have a curved surface now. It's curving. I'm gonna offset the surface. The distance, you can see little arrows there, so if I hit flip, it will flip the direction. Is it offset on the inside or the outside? Distance, I can click this and I can type a distance. I want it to offset 2 feet or 6 inches or whatever. Or I can just like click two points in Rhino, and that will set a distance. And it makes 2 of these, okay? And so again, I would offset it with solid equals no, and that will give you this result, okay? So now I've got these 2, so I can select both. I can duplicate the border, and then I could loft. Lofting is a great command. Let's hit escape. Let's go back to shaded mode. I can loft, and to make this clear, let's select the 2 surfaces. Let's hide. Hide is a great command to get things out of the way. You can see I've got 2 curves now, the 2 borders. Let's hit loft. Let's select the 2 curves. Let's hit enter. And you can see there'll be a little loft options button. Lofting, this also comes from the boat building world. They'd use lofting to kind of figure out the ribs of boats. By default, it's do not simplify, and it might be a little bit janky. Do rebuild, and this will just make sure that the curves have the same amount of control points, so your loft is smoother. That's all you need to know. You could rebuild the curves before you run the command to have more control, or you can just do it right here. So give it a high number, let's say 500. So now I've got this funky seaweed shaped sidewall, and if I type show, it'll bring back the things that I hid. And let's change the material on the side wall to my wall layer, so now it's pink. Pretty cool. And at this point, if we start to get these like little constructions and you're finding it annoying to maybe have to select everything all the time, or click one, hold shift, click the other one, rotate, like hold shift, click the other one, rather than joining them, so rather than welding them at their edges, I can just group them. And so by grouping them, they're still on separate layers, they're still individual objects, but I can just click once and then I can copy it and say rotate one of them, scale one, kind of whatever. Got a number of these things kind of going, and maybe at this point I want to be ZSA is my friend. Zoom selected, all windows. I'm gonna move these things so they're like sitting on the ground. So like kind of working in the side view is helpful for like moving things up. I've got the start of a little composition going on, just through copying and pasting this one object. So grouping's really nice. I'm gonna hit save here. I'm gonna look at the top of my window next to the name, and there's a little parentheses with a number and MB. That is like the size of your file. Like how many megabytes large is your file? One more thing that I mentioned in here. Where did I put it? Right at the top. Create blocks. When copying a piece or a collection of pieces of geometry, blocks are different than groups, but they allow me to do lots of things, or have lots of geometry inside of a scene without the file size getting too big. So just FYI, I type block, then I click a base point somewhere. Let's call it seaweed thingy, hit OK. And now when I click on this geometry, and I look in the properties window, it says block instance. So I know that this is a block. And in order to manipulate this, in order to do anything with it, I would need to explode it. So like get out of the block. Blocks are cool because I can then, if I type insert allows me to look at, I only have one now, but like the list of the blocks that I have in my scene, and I could click and insert that block. And so this is how, like, if you're gonna put a bunch of toilets inside of a 3D model, like you would have a block of the toilet, because it's probably like was designed in 3D by the manufacturer or something. And you download it off the website and then you stick it into your 3D model. And so that's why blocks are useful. But we can do it to kind of reduce our file size, or to like get complexity, to have lots of things in your scene. Okay, so that's like basically all I need to know to achieve this assignment. There's lots of other things that we can do. I'll just show a few real quick. Specifically, we can use the same command, extruding and lofting. These two commands are kind of the main ways that we're gonna make geometry, or make, let's say, a surface. If I look at the surface menu, you see there's a few others. Sweep, revolve, curve network. We can cover these more later, but say for example you want to make a wall that kind of goes around your wires. So like in the top view, we could draw a line, and I don't have my O snaps on, so I'm just kind of freestyling here. So that's actually not one line, it's a polyline, so it's multiple lines joined together. This is the little shortcut for it, polyline. I can then let's make wall layer live. I could extrude that line. And then I could offset the surface. In this case, it's just a solid surface, so let's keep solid on. So that gives me this kind of extruded, thickened wall, right? So I've extruded it, I offset it. That's it. I could also, there's a command called slab, which allows me to do both of those at the same time. So it'll offset and then extrude. Sometimes a little janky. There we go. Depends on the direction you do it. So slab will kind of immediately do that. Let's go back. And so this is just pink, right? But maybe at this point I want to use one of my wallpaper textures. So say this image of, I don't know what this was from, like some actual wallpaper from the Biodiversity Heritage Library. Or maybe I photoshopped and made a texture, made my own kind of like custom wallpaper. Or maybe I cropped into this image of silos and made a strip, right, that I could use. So I could apply those same images as materials. Say my wall layer, let's make a custom material. Let's call it wall paper. Let's assign the color. It can be, so I got a whole bunch of them here. Here's a flower texture. So it kind of put it on the sides too. And it looks nice and stretched, or ugly and stretched, let's say. This gets into a thing that I don't want you guys to worry too much about, but it's called texture mapping. So under properties, there's a couple of icons at the top. Most of the time we ignore these, but texture mapping, if we click on it, we can see that there's different types of texture mapping. And so when I'm explaining, going around the room and explaining, we have geometry and we have an image, and we're putting the image onto the geometry. That process is called texture mapping. So we can change the mapping of the image through all of these settings. So by default, all we've been using is surface. And what that means is you don't need to change anything. It just maps it onto the surface one-to-one. And this was the whole point of the Photoshop process, where we cropped it and kind of like cropped into the image, is so that surface mapping works. If I'm trying to apply, say, this water or this wallpaper, but I want to make it smaller or make it look different anyhow, I can make different types of mapping. There's a bunch. You should do box mapping. So click on the box, and then if I click in here and like define a little box and hit enter, it will map that image onto the surface according to the size of that box. Or I can click on the image, and inside of my texture mapping properties, there's a bunch of numbers, XYZ and UVW. I'm just gonna change the UVW, this one called repeat. Let's make it 2 by 2 by 2. So it repeats twice as much. Or if I say 10, 10, 10, now if I zoom in on this sucker, like these little flowers are really small and really tiny. Okay. Easier to see. Maybe let's give this a dot pattern. These are little tiny dots. 1 by 1 by 1. Right? So I changed the mapping on this one, but I didn't change the mapping on this one. If I needed to change that one, I would need to, or if I want to remap that one, I would need to explode out of my block, because I already made a block. And then I could mess with this mapping. Call it box mapping. So there's a whole science to like mapping. You don't need to worry about it too much, but just know that you should, if you want to make it bigger or smaller, go to the texture mapping properties, click the box mapping icon, and then change the value in the UVW repeat. Okay. There's cylinder mapping, there's planar mapping, there's custom mapping, like it's a whole thing. But sound good? Starting to look kind of cool. What else can I cover? And that's about it. That's like all the stuff that I think array and pipe are the only two that I didn't really go over. Array, say this little guy here. Say I want to make the ground have like a surface. I can array this thing. I don't know, let's do it 10 by 10 by 1. Kind of a boring ground. I might want to go in here and like rotate some of these things, but it just like copied it a whole bunch of times. So arraying, I can array along a line. I can array, in this case, just like in a big grid. Array curve is, yeah, I'll show that one. It's kind of cool. Say we have a curve on this ground. I'm gonna do it off to the side here. Let's say we have a curve. There we go. Here's this. There's a grouped object, not a block. I'm gonna stick it near the end of it. I'm gonna rotate it. Can't see the widget, just type rotate. And if I type array, and this is true of like many Rhino commands, if I start typing it, I'll see a list in my command line of all the different ways I can array things. So there's array curve, array hole polar, array linear, array polar, array surface, like all this stuff. The best way I would say to learn all this stuff is to try it. Like just like click through. The curious of monkeys will just click buttons and see what happens. The best way you can learn Rhino is like dedicate a few hours and just like go through and like click all the things and see what works. But for this assignment, all you need to know is the ones on this PDF. Okay, but array curve, select objects to array, hit enter, select the path curve, and then we want to do either like the distance between the items or the number of items. So let's just say 10 items. Let's do 50 items. That's better. Now I like did a whole bunch of these things, like arrayed along this curve, which by having a lot of them starts to create like a cool texture. Right? Just of copying this thing, it becomes more than the original. Questions? You guys are like, I have all the questions. I just don't, I gotta try it first. Cool. So I'm gonna talk just real briefly while we're here about rendering. So say you're done. Say I got this thing ready to go. Let's go to my named views, or I can, under my viewport mode, go to set view. There's another way to access these. And like flat view front, or axon. And if I change it to rendered, we can see we have shadows, right? And so by rendering it, it is now taking the sun, and if I type sun, I can open up my sun options. It's a bit smaller. Under my sun options, if I turn it off, we just have daylight or the skylight. So if I type lights, it opens up my other little panel that shows me my lights that are in the scene. Okay, so by default, Rhino's got a sun and a skylight. The way to think about this is the sun is that big yellow orb really far away that's shooting particles at us, and they're hitting directly. It's like a direct light. The skylight is like the sky, this dome that is reflecting light off of the earth and kind of bouncing around. Let's call it soft light versus direct light. Right? The skylight plus the sun is what makes things seem realistic. By default, the sun might be off. So type lights or type sun and turn it on. Under the sun menu, if manual control is not on, we can like pick a location. So I could say I want to be in Champaign, Illinois, somewhere near there, in October in the morning. So I get like very specific, like where in the world we are. Like October light's the best light, so we want to do that. We want to have the sun be low, so it's nice and like beautiful. You don't want like July light with the sun at noon, because no photographer would ever do that. And we're dealing with light rays and sun, and so we're thinking about being a photographer at this point. You can also click manual control, and then we can, with these little dials, kind of crank around where the sun is. So just like move it from the west to the east, make it be above to the horizon or below the horizon. It will be night. There's not really a good built-in star system for Rhino, so keep it above the horizon. Or maybe you don't like the sun and you just want to make your own light. So under the light menu, you can click plus button and we can make our own like directional light. And so this becomes this little object, this little icon that's floating out here, and that is my light. We can change the color of it. We can make the light color. Let's make it cyan. I want to rotate this thing so it's pointing down. I'm going to turn off the skylight. Here's another cool command, mirror. I'm going to mirror that light, so I have a second light coming the other direction. I'm going to make that one hot pink. So now you can see under my lights, I've got no sun, no skylight, but these pink lights, pink and blue lights going on. So now when I go to rendered, it's like disco, like whatever. Or like I'm in a photo studio with like gel filters over my light, okay? And these light objects, we need to go to shaded. So I can click it. If I was to rotate it, it will adjust where that particular color is coming from, okay? I'm gonna turn off these funky lights. Let's get our sun and skylight back on. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we are in rendered mode. It's confusing because it uses the word rendered, but we are not rendering the actual light rays yet. In order to do that, we need to go to the render menu up at the top, and it's very confusing. Under the render menu, there's a button called render. So render the render. It will get you a render. Like the language here gets really complicated, but just know that what we're trying to do is calculate light rays bouncing around inside of this space. Until we do that, we have not really rendered it. We haven't done a final render. There are different renderers in the world. If you go down in render menu, go to current renderer, you see I have V-Ray for Rhino. You won't have that. All you'll have is like Rhino render. There's a plugin for like a Rhino specific renderer. It's called Flamingo. I don't know if anyone uses it ever. AutoCAD has its own renderers. I think it's called Arnold. There are lots and lots of renderers in the world. V-Ray is the one I like to use, but let's just use the Rhino render. Let's go to render window and hit render. gonna think for a second, and then it will open up our little render window somewhere. There we go. So it's gonna open up this like separate little window, and it's gonna think a little bit, and it's gonna, shouldn't be this slow. The image is gonna start to come to life. And so what it's doing now is it's calculating these little light rays as they bounce around, and basically all you need to know is that your shadows are gonna be nice and crisp, and it's gonna look more realistic. It's gonna look more like what you want. So as you can see, this starts to come to life. See the shadow of this person. It's a little fuzzy. It'll start to kind of coalesce into a clear image. Looks better than my render preview, which I have here. So it's really what it's called. It's a preview, like a render preview. So if you want your images to look really good, stop rendering. Let's reset our view mode. Set view, axon. Then I can go to the render window. Maybe change my render properties down below. This will, I can change the settings, looking under the hood of the rendering. Rhino render properties are super basic. You can change like the size of it. So yeah, my DPI was really huge. Let's do like 1200 by 1200 or 1920 by 1080. DPI, pixels per inch. There's a couple of quality settings here, but basically you should know DPI a little bit. 72 is good for web on the internet. Anything above like 120 is good for like printing. Like 120, 150 is like fine for like whatever we're doing in this class. If you're making like really high resolution artwork that you want to maybe plot out really big, you should pop up to like 200 to 300. The only reason you need above 300 DPI is if you're making like a poster on the side of a building or something, where you're going to be really enlarging it, making it big. Or if you've got like really nice photo paper or something. There's some settings on the background. This thing, 360 environments are kind of cool. You can get into the idea of like taking 360 pictures or what we call HDRI images to be the background rather than this sun. And there's a few other settings that we don't need to worry about. But the main thing, dimensions. Making sure you change your dimensions. When you first are rendering things, like we usually keep the dimensions really small so that we can run it quickly and then see how it looks. And then once it looks good, we'll increase the resolution. We'll do a higher quality one. Because this one, for example, if I go to render, I have a lot of junk in the background here. It should kind of tell you at the bottom like how long it will take. If you pop it up above, 1920 by 1080, it might take a while. And if your DPI is up to like 300 and you have larger than 1920 by 1080, go have lunch, go have dinner, like go sleep, wake up in the morning, and then this thing will be ready. Historically, like it's been kind of a process to get your renders output. So that's why I showed you guys the viewport display capture command. So that this is not necessary. You don't need to render the images. You can just like capture the viewports of it. Maybe once you finish your modeling, you can spend some time rendering out these images. The reason I'm saying this is rendering is a trap. You can spend forever tweaking the settings and getting the lighting just right and like fixing it and doing tests and then re-rendering it, and next thing you know it's like Sunday night and you haven't done any design and modeling, but you've got like a whole folder full of like render tests that you've been working on. So just know that it can be a trap. See, we kind of see how it's looking. I think that's it. So this 72 DPI, you can see at the bottom and tell you how zoomed in we are. That's actually how big it is at full resolution. So I start zooming in more. It's starting to like blow out and get a little bit fuzzy. So I would want to increase the DPI, increase the overall resolution, and redo it. I'll just show you for reference. I use this plugin called V-Ray. Most professionals do. V-Ray has its own toolbar. That's what this is. It's like V-Ray toolbar. It has some beautiful things like this infinite plane. It gives you a nice infinite surface. We can open up the V-Ray render settings, and we can see it looks a little bit different. This is totally FYI. This is for you guys like in the future who are like way into this stuff. You should maybe look into V-Ray, particularly if you're a photographer. As you noticed in Rhino, under the settings, the only thing I can do to make the exposure different is to like turn the sun down, like make the sun less bright. It's like a dimmer on like the intensity of it. I can't change like the ISO, the aperture, the f-stop, like any of these things that, if you have learned about cameras at all, allow you to adjust or control the exposure. So V-Ray is pretty cool. Under the camera settings, we can look at the exposure. I'm gonna turn on, there's also some next generation things here, like real-time rendering. Let's see if this works without crashing. If you start doing this sort of stuff, like this is when you want multiple monitors, because it becomes really hard to like see everything on your screen. Oh my gosh. We're great with the streaming. Okay, so this one's gonna kind of coalesce together, because what it's doing is, if I was to rotate the camera, it would update the render. But even now, we can see that the shadows are like a lot crisper. So V-Ray, in addition to being able to adjust the exposure, has a much more realistic model, or like algorithm with how it calculates bounces, or how it calculates like a light ray, like hitting the ground, like bouncing up, hitting a piece of white, reflecting off that, hitting a piece of green, turning green, reflecting and bouncing off that. And it just looks like a lot juicier, a lot more realistic. I'm gonna hit, let's see, let's try this. Okay, so under camera, like exposure, this is like one number we can change the exposure, or if I go to advanced camera parameters, we've got ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed. So if you've ever driven a DSLR camera, this stuff will seem very familiar, and actually it works very intuitively compared to it. So say f-stop, if I make this small, or the ISO, if I make this smaller, it'll let in less light or be like faster film, and this image here will start to get darker. It's going really slow with the streaming, but V-Ray also has a bunch of like cool materials in here, like fur and hair and grass. We got some nice trees if you're getting to that point. It's got some really realistic sky models as well. Like it's really powerful what you can do. So FYI, in the future, you can mess with this. I think you can download a trial version of V-Ray, and they actually have a good price for like a monthly subscription. So you can like use it for the end of your semesters when you need to like make some nice renderings, or say you want to put your portfolio together. I'll make some renderings out of it. But I'm going to show you guys Twinmotion. We're going to use that one for rendering this stuff, but not today. I want you guys to maybe, we can wrap this up and we can spend the rest of the class period kind of working on this. What I've shown you, this workflow, I'm happy to repeat it for any of you. Happy to answer any specific questions. If there's like a thing that you want to figure out how to model, just bring me a sketch, bring me a paper model, something that shows you're thinking about it rather than just words, right? We're going to communicate with our pens and pencils. Cool, so that kind of covers most of it. There's obviously, like, if you look under curves and surfaces, there's lots of different ways to draw surfaces, lots of different types of curves we can draw. I didn't get into meshes or sub-Ds at all. We probably won't talk about sub-Ds. It's like an advanced surface type. You can look around at the transform menu, move, copy, rotate 3D, scale, mirror. I didn't talk about shearing, but that's available. And then all these other ones you can start to mess with if you want. Sound good? Any questions for those of you here? Or those on the internet? No? All right. Have fun.